This Honourable House is now in Standing Finance Committee.
Mr. Chairman, Head 35, Ministry of People, Empowerment and Elder Affairs, in the amount of 116,779,476.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South.
Mr. Chairman, I beg permission for my staff from the Ministry of People Empowerment to join me in the well.
Permission granted, Honourable Minister. This House is now in Standing Finance Committee. Before I proceed to the opening remarks from the Minister of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, let me give the guidelines under which these sessions are held for the benefit, in particular, of the public officers who have joined us here today. The Minister is allowed to give his opening remarks momentarily for 10 minutes. We will have a response from the Honourable Leader of the Opposition for the said time. And thereafter, we move to Honourable members of the House who would indicate as they like to speak and will be called in that order. Questions to the Minister should not exceed 3 minutes. And as I indicated, you will either choose to ask your question directly, or, and you have to do that within the 3-minute period. You cannot speak for 3 minutes and then pose the question. A member is allowed 3 supplementary or 3 related questions to the initial question posed to the minister if it is believed that some elucidation is required. The minister may call on any of the officers present with him in the well to respond to any particular question. I'm asking that for the records, officers indicate their names and position so that it is captured in the records of the House. Honorable Minister, you have the floor to give your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to begin by thanking my staff for the work they would have done during the course of the last year. I believe that most of Barbados would agree that the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs attended to the business of the most vulnerable in Barbados with a sense of enthusiasm and profound effort. I want to say, Mr. Chair, that during the course of the year, the ministry spent significant time, indeed, in a deliberate effort to refocus and to recharge, and to make sure that the issues that were raised in the previous year were addressed during this year. We sat down, sir, and we all agreed on a vision for the ministry going forward. We agreed, as the Prime Minister has asked, for us to work on the basics, because it is okay for us to have these high-level plans, but at the end of the day, it matters how these programs are executed. And you will see, sir, that during the course of the year, we focused a lot on legislation. This ministry would have addressed outstanding pieces of social legislation that had not been addressed for years, and in some cases had never been addressed. I speak, sir, particularly of the legislation we brought on children that allows us to modernize the legislative framework as it related to child protection in Barbados. I speak of the legislation that we brought on the rights of persons with disabilities, which this Parliament has already passed. I speak of the legislation that we are bringing, that we now have with the CPC, and I hope to have laid in March or April in relation to the rights of the elderly. And I speak of the legislation on the amalgamation of the social services, which should be laid in the Parliament within the next 2 weeks as well. Therefore, bringing a complete circle of empowerment and change to that framework. Specifically on the estimates, Mr. Chair, you would notice that for this year, we have been allocated $118,963,000. And while at the surface, this looks like a very small reduction, I should want to say up front that included in those estimates were, the one for last year were related to capital expenditure, some that we will not repeat this year. And of course, we're still hoping that by the end of the year to have a move in to do additional work, which I will speak to later. So in essence, what I'm saying in essence is that we actually will have more funds available to this ministry than we had last year. The ministry has had a number of successes. I've just spoken to the amalgamation. This has been on the books for a long time. While I was Director of Social Policy in 2007, we had embarked on this process, and in fact, this process was started in the mid-90s. And different governments have had different approaches. There was an entire Ministry of Family, and this is the first time that any government has been able to do this amalgamation. The amalgamation is important because it speaks to us being able to better deliver goods and services in an efficient manner to the people who need those goods and services the most. And the fact that we have completed it in this year speaks volumes not only about the work that the ministry would have done, but on what the people of Barbados can expect from a reformed, refocused ministry. Furthermore, Mr. Chairman, I would want to say that the amalgamation is more than just an amalgamation in principle. Indeed, we have created a new entity called the Social Empowerment Agency, which is reflected in these estimates. It would be an amalgamation of the National Disabilities Unit, the Child Care Board, the National Assistance Board, the Welfare Department, and we've also taken on board the work once done by the Resilience Unit. So essentially, we've created a unit that is meant to focus specifically on the most vulnerable, to be able to be in the communities, to offer a wider reach, to become a much more confidential, resilient unit, but also a unit that the people would then see in their communities. Instead of having to go to town, the unit would then be able to bring its services to the people. In relation to children, we would have passed the Child Protection Bill, as I have already stated, but we've also done some additional things. In the legislation for child protection, we spoke of a secure residential treatment facility that would allow us to offer interventions to the people who need those interventions the most, Mr. Chair. And we are in the process of acquiring a building to be able to offer those services, to treat to persons who need treatment. As it stands, and as it has always stood, there is a lacuna. Because currently the Child Care Board does not have the capacity to attend to some of the most troubled children who exhibit troubled behavior. And some of those children would have been treated previously under our justice system, but we have said in our legislation that's not good enough. And that we need to treat these people as humans and offer them the best of services. And that is what we'll be doing with that particular facility. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, the usual amount of persons, on an average, we see about 500 cases of abuse, which tells us that there is something that has to be done to protect children in Barbados. We're working with the Children's Trust as well to build a very new, very modern facility at Bullins. It will be the most advanced protection facility for children, so that the ministry is working to protect children at all levels. As it relates to the elderly, we've also laid the legislation, we will be laying the legislation in a few weeks. Thus far, the 144 workers of home care attend to 1,347 persons. And I want to repeat that. In home help, which persons in Barbados normally know as the workers in blue, there were 1,347 persons receiving home help from 144 persons. In the elder care program, there were 867 persons receiving support from 420 companions. Given that the population is aging, we are obviously facing pressure to do more because Barbados has gotten older. I have said on so many occasions, Mr. Chair, that Barbados did not prepare well for an aging population, and that it is now the onus on this government to be able to do a lot of things that weren't previously done. And some of those things involve the residential facilities that we will be building at Sterling. Last year, in the estimates, we were given $7 million to do that work. We started doing some of the work at Sterling to build out the residential facility. We anticipate that by the end of this year, we're going to have at least 30 residences for elderly persons. We anticipate that we're also going to build out some facilities for persons with disabilities as well. But because I believe that we have to do the small things right, a major part of the work we would have done was in relation to training. And 620 workers would have received training in values and ethical behavior, and 70 received training in other related areas. Mr. Chairman, it is my view that if we do these things, and we treat to people, because there is no sense us pretending that people haven't said what they've said in relation to how they feel they're treated when they engage social services. So we've been doing a lot of work to make sure that the public has a better experience when they come into contact with the social services sector. In relation to disabilities, Mr. Chair, we would have passed the legislation. We would have also worked very closely with the NISSS to add 4 new categories: autism, cerebral palsy, multiple sclerosis, and Down syndrome, that would allow persons who traditionally in Barbados were not benefiting from that support are now receiving a non-contributory pension and support. And it meant that 653 persons who would not have benefited before are now benefiting from the government of Barbados' support to allow persons with disabilities to have a decent standard of living. And we intend to do more in that regard as well. We've also been working to make sure that there are more jobs for persons with disabilities. The ministry itself has hired about 8 persons over the course of the last year and a half, and this will continue as well. In relation to the welfare department, there are 5,678 persons who received support during the course of the year, and these were grants totaling just over $20 million, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair. This is a slight increase over what we would have done last year. And the truth is, the numbers at the welfare department are pretty much steady. We saw a boom during COVID and immediately post-COVID, but there's been a petering out of the number of persons who are coming for support. But there's some very basic things that we have to be able to do, and you will see when we get to the One Family, in fact, in the One Family, where we have determined that we want to help the 1,000 most vulnerable families. Mr. Chairman, this program is so important because it allows us to really delve in to the issues that cause poverty, the ones that create them, and the ones that show how they're manifested. And this program allows us to go very, very deep in relation to how we're able to engage persons. And of the almost 1,000 persons that we are engaging now, we will be satisfied to say that we have enrolled 407 persons in training. We've had 130 participated in CXC classes because we believe, yesterday there was a conversation around the difference between social assistance and empowerment. And while I think light was made of that, there is a big difference. And the Honourable Minister responsible for crime in the previous ministry was a minister in this ministry. The truth is, for social assistance, we're normally talking about persons who receive benefit, either monetary or in kind. When we speak of empowerment, predominantly we're speaking of counseling, we're speaking of training, we're speaking of those things that allow people being able to start a business, allow a person without direct monetary benefit to be able to feel empowered. So while, as I said, we made light of it, the truth is there is a significant difference between social assistance and social empowerment. Mr. Chairman, sir, as I get to the end, we would have also done some work in relation to the resilience unit, which is now going to be housed in the Social Empowerment Agency. And for the first time, Barbadians must know that when there's been a fire, I doubt there's any person who's experienced, regrettably, a fire or a shock in the last year that did not benefit from social support from the resilience unit, to the extent that persons who have a fire could anticipate within a few hours, an officer is going to be on the ground, they were going to get a basic package, they're going to be housed almost immediately while we find long-term conditions. And the reason for that is simple. We believe that if people are experiencing a shock, that they should be able to benefit and to have at least the support to minimize that shock. We will also have a conversation, I believe, during these estimates on the new HIV and well-being unit that we created, as well as the work that we are doing in gender. So as I close, Mr. Chairman, sir, I again want to thank the team in the ministry. I want to thank my staff, all of them. I want to thank the public for the support that we would have received. I want to thank, I always do it, but I feel like I must thank the CPC's office because we've turned out the most legislation that any social ministry has ever turned out in the history of Barbados, and I want to thank the CPC for that. And with those few words, Mr. Chair, I beg that Head 35 stand part.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I'm obliged to you, Your Honor. And just maybe this will be the occasion on which the estimates, debates become constructive, purposive, and less than rancorous. Your Honor, I want to look philosophically at welfare systems, and I want to compare the welfare systems of the Western Scandinavian countries with those of these parts of the world, certainly Barbados. And look, there'll be no surprise that the welfare department in these estimates would be allocated, I think, the largest sum of money. We tend to see this ministry and the work of this ministry essentially as a welfare ministry, and there's a reason for that. That is related to the history of this country. Now, I made comparison with the Scandinavians because one may, in doing an assessment of those countries, consider that their welfare systems tend to be permanently built into systems of social development. You have a country, for example, like, let's say Norway, that has great oil wealth, and they look after a human being from the age of 1 day to the age of death. And as I've said, they build into their systems this pursuit or purpose of protecting the members of the society. And often it has less to do with poverty and more to do with protecting an entire society. Now, in Barbados, because of our peculiar history, a history of the haves and the have-nots, the government and the state, agencies of state, have always felt an obligation to establish systems of welfare, not so much for the larger protection of the society, but for the protection of the poor, so that you have two systems which you may compare, which are conceptually and philosophically different. Now, in this part of the world, we tend to see welfare as poverty alleviation. As I've said, in those countries, it is protective of an entire society. So that tends to be one of the fundamental differences between these welfare systems. And the state takes on the responsibility, and it would not be fair for me to mention the state only, but you have charitable and philanthropic groups, and I will not leave out the church. The church also tends to be an agency in the pursuit of poverty alleviation. Now, how does the state do this? The state, as we all know, collects taxes. And when the state or the government tells you that an economy is buoyant, they will, as a result of that buoyancy in the economy, they will be able to collect more taxes. And they will be better able to protect the poor and to alleviate the condition of poverty. And so when the Central Bank of Barbados and when the government of Barbados says that the economy is doing well, the poor naturally expect that they will do better, certainly if not in terms of receiving jobs, certainly in terms of that protection and that alleviation of their condition, their human condition of impoverishment. And so, as I said, if the government says that the economy is doing well, we expect that welfare systems will also improve the distribution of the state's resources. So the question is the economy doing well? And if it is doing well, one expects that the allocation in these estimates to the welfare department would increase, because just yesterday, and I'm going to give live examples, just yesterday there was a job fair at a certain company. I'm not going to name the company. I don't call the names of private individuals in here, whether corporate or human, but I understand a large number of persons turned up. And if one has any compassion and empathy, and ministers, politicians are not politicians unless they understand compassion and empathy. I don't like to say love because people get very sensitive when you speak of love. But there has been a situation just yesterday in this country when there was a manifestation of the poverty that has visited the lives of people in this country. That being the case, it means that this ministry, this welfare department, becomes obligated and must become sensitive to that human condition, and that a government must become sensitive to that human condition. And if the government claims that the economy is buoyant, if the government claims that the economy is doing well, then the government will find itself politically and morally and economically obligated to increase the allocation to this department. So that is a question not so much for this minister. Of course, he'll be due some questions, but it will become a question for the government. Are you able as a government to offer that protection to those who are most vulnerable? And as I've said, this Parliament has the opportunity from this debate to approach a debate, as I've said, that is constructive, purposive, and less than rancorous. The public of this country, whether rich or poor, are entitled to hear this Parliament with some maturity approach that discourse, because unless we are able to protect those who are poor, we will not be able to protect an entire society. Your Honor, I therefore ask at this point that this Parliament finds itself able, if not to reach consensus, to consider that this is one of the more important debates, because hunger is not partisan. Homelessness is not partisan. The inability of a child to attend to his classes in an alert condition, if he's able to attend at all, that is not partisan. And I'm using the word partisan as opposed to political. It is a political matter because politicians are involved in it. And it comes to this Parliament. The question of poverty alleviation comes to this Parliament. And this Parliament is a place of politics. So these issues are political. The question is, are they partisan? My response, Your Honor, is that they're not partisan. As I've said and I repeat, hunger does not know a political party. Homelessness does not know a political party. Joblessness does not know a political party. These human conditions are not subject to any partisan divide. And you'll find that there are a lot of people who receive this assistance. And if you join that assistance with partisan discourse, they're not interested. So let us meet that public, let us meet that vulnerability, let us meet that need with a debate, a discourse, a discussion that is constructive, purposive, and less or lacking in rancor. That is the undertaking from this side, sir. I believe I can get that undertaking, that similar undertaking from the other side as we attempt to solve the problem, the scourge, the national scourge of poverty that has been with this country for a long, long time. And unlike the Scandinavian countries, we may not have the national wealth to build permanent systems for social development, and that we are still on the path of poverty alleviation. If we must be on that path of poverty alleviation, let us approach it with sound philosophies and let us approach it with wisdom. Your Honor, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you, Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Honourable Minister.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I would want to agree with the Leader of the Opposition that there should be no political divide on these matters. And in fact, thus far... Partisan divide on these matters. And thus far, we've had none. But I also feel the need to shed some light on a few things. The ministry has not just focused on offering basic social support. In fact, the new agency in the ministry is called the Social Empowerment Agency, with an entire focus to move people from a case of dependency to a place where they can actually be so empowered as to give back. We've changed the focus of the ministry. Traditionally, the welfare model has been a model whereby persons go looking for particular things and that particular need is treated. In the ministry, we've had a view that empowerment and transformation must be the bottom line. Specifically on the Nordic model that was mentioned, the Scandinavian model, the truth is that in recent times, even the Scandinavian model is under pressure. And there is a significant difference between the Scandinavian model and our model for certain reasons which I will explain. In the Scandinavian model, the system is built on heavy taxes. The persons within that arrangement anticipate that they will pay extremely high taxes and that they should get some level of support. Within recent times, there's been complaints that the inequality is actually widening in those societies. The other assumption was, in relation to that model, was that the persons would have a significant amount of trust in the state, that would allow the state to engage in certain practices that other states do not have the luxury to engage in. For example, there was a view that in the Scandinavian model, you could have what they refer to as creative destruction. Creative destruction meant that if you had a model that was not working, if you had an industry that was not working, the state would almost be free to dismantle it, to build new models, because the persons trusted the state so much. Many times, persons would fall between the cracks, even within those models. Barbados does not have that history. We do not dismantle in such a way as to expose people. So you have to understand that there's certain differences between the two models. At the end of the day, poverty alleviation is going to be part of any ministry responsible for social care. But it's not the be-all, end-all to it. Like the Honourable Member, most of the members on our side have concerned themselves with poverty. Personally, before I end, I've lived it, Mr. Chairman. I have studied it because I lived it. I taught it at the university for 10 years. I've practiced it here in Barbados and as part of the Canadian government. So this is nothing that I have stumbled upon. And I believe that the staff that is sitting before you have the experience, the wherewithal, the education to be able to offer a very sound perspective on where it is that we must go. These estimates reflect a new thinking. The Social Empowerment Agency is a new thinking. The legitimacy of our efforts is manifested in the legislation that we brought, the administrative arrangements that we have changed as well, and a new policy framework. So I anticipate that there are going to be significant benefits to the people. And I will close by saying this as I began by saying it. At the end of the day, the PM has been very, very clear in her thinking. And again, we also agree that we have to get back to basics. How are people treated when they come? How do we make people feel when they leave? And if we can do those things right, as we have been trying to do, then I believe Barbados will begin a serious transformation. And then lastly, I've always, and perhaps this is a question for the opposition leader to reflect upon, I've always found it interesting that there's a belief that as a state does better, there should be more welfare. And there could be a philosophical opposition to that, because if a state is doing better, in many cases, you need less welfare because it is believed that people should have jobs and people will be able to work and people are trained. So it may not necessarily happen in the first year or the second year, but eventually. And so I do not want there to be this linear kind of association between a country's capacity to perform well and the amount of welfare, because there are some instances where it's going to be true, and there are many instances where it's not going to be true.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Minister. I just want to begin by posing this question to you. I heard you speak with respect to the One Family program. And I believe, while it is a good program, I don't think that that a lot is known about it by Barbadians generally in terms of how you become a part of that program and what is basically, in essence, the criteria. How are you enrolled in such a program? I will let you to shed, you and your team to say, or member of your team to shed some light on that.
Mr. Chair, will ask the head of that department, Ms. Nicole Daniel, to respond and perhaps just give you a general overview about the program, what it was intended to do, and then at the end, if necessary, I will add my thoughts.
Hi, good afternoon. Nicole Daniel, Social Development Project Manager for the One Family Program. And now, as we may be aware, the One Family Program seeks to empower the lives of 1,000 of the most vulnerable persons across Barbados. And as we seek to empower these lives through a more holistic and targeted intervention, we do definitely need the support of many of the churches, many NGOs, charitable organizations, etc. We have recognized that in partnership with many of these institutions, and working together to help these families, that we definitely need a more targeted approach to make sure that everyone is aware of what the program entails, the criteria in terms of how persons can get on board. Currently, we have 80 persons on board, sponsoring 80 of the families within the program. But a more detailed and a more targeted strategy is on the way, where we're trying to ensure that, as I said, more persons are aware what the program entails, how they can benefit, what are the things that the impact that the program will have on the families. So this is something that we are currently working on, and we will try our best to make every Barbadian aware of the details and the impact that the program has to offer. Okay, so for each of the pillars, because it is a holistic approach, we are dealing with several areas where we have 7 key pillars. So we are interested in areas such as personal identification. We are looking at areas of education and human resource development. We are looking at health promotion, employment, family dynamics, housing, and income and social security. So from these areas and these pillars, if we have persons who are willing to sponsor families, we would provide them with the necessary profiles about the particular family. If you have persons who are retired, nurses who are also retired who want to give back to the program. So we're looking for persons in terms of mentorship, in terms of coaching, or financial donations in order to assist these families within the program. So these are the 7 key pillars that we're working holistically to improve the performance of the families within the program.
Chair, very quickly. So the One Family program, when I was at the ministry years ago, there was a program that we took from the Chilean model called Prevente. The original model from this Prevente program, there was a program that was run then, this is like 2005, 2006, 2007, before governments had changed. There was a program that was run through the Poverty Alleviation Bureau at the time. And we adopted a lot of the model from the Prevente program from Chile. When the governments had changed, the program was taken out and formed and fashioned into the IC Bridge program. So it started in 2006, 2007 as a smaller set of services under the Poverty Bureau, became a full program between 2008 and 2018, sorry. And when we became the government, we took the program and we expanded it, we included some other pillars using the IC Bridge model between 2008 and 2018 as almost like a pilot. And then we improved it, and we've expanded it now to include the 1,000 most vulnerable families. The difference that we also made with this program is that fundamentally the philosophical underpinning in this program is that Barbadians are a lot more generous than other people may think. And so our view is that Barbadians would come forward and support some of the families who are in need, and we are seeing Barbadians coming forward. And I would want to use this opportunity again to encourage more families to come forward and support families who are in need. The last poverty study has said about 20% of the population was in poverty, which tells us that a significant amount is out of poverty. And it's also been my experience that even people who are in poverty are willing to help other people. And we've also received significant support from the private sector as well. So the model is that we were going to receive government support, yes, on one hand, but we also want to encourage the families and the private sector to come forward and offer wider support so that we will be in a position to do better for persons who are in need. Thanks.
Thank you. Minister, just a follow-up question in relation to this program. Is there a time when you actually, what I would say, graduate from this, from the program in itself? How do you determine if you're going to, if some person continuously needs the help or if they can venture out now on their own.
Yes, the program is for 2 years. And what we will see is that we will recognize some persons moving. We can even measure the progress against the eligibility score sheet from where they would have started to see some measure of movement along the course. Now, everyone may not, our goal really is to see all the 1,000 families actually graduate from the program, but every family is different. The mindset change that we have to work with. Yes, we can take a horse to the water, but you can't necessarily make them drink. But what the program offers is a creative way of trying to add maybe some flavor to the water, trying to get persons more interested in changing and believing in themselves and being able to invest in themselves so that they can actually do better and become more self-sufficient. What we are also looking at is trying to maybe change the source of that water, where if we change the source, maybe they are more interested in listening to persons who've actually been in poverty, done some things to help themselves, including the training or education or counseling, and been in a position to better able help themselves. Or we can look at others who are actually taking in and investing in themselves and making themselves better aware, better informed, actually motivating themselves. So although the program is for 2 years, you will see definitely some progress where persons are able to graduate from the program, and some will take a little bit longer. As I said, that mindset change is very critical, and we are really focusing on the family dynamics part of it as it relates to behavioral change. So each family, as I said, is going to be different. Each family is going to progress differently, and we are working with all of them to try to meet that measure. From this standpoint right now, I can say that there has been some families that have made some significant progress, and others that are, trying to catch up. But as I said, we are finding creative ways and means to help these families to move out of poverty.
Chair, I totally endorse what was said. I just want to give a real life perspective. When the One Family program started, there were, and the director will be much more informed than I, but there were persons who came forward. We say you have to register, bring an ID card. And a significant number of persons did not have ID cards. Or the idea of having a TAMIS did not register with many of them. One of the things that I found the most interesting is that we have relied, or we want to rely on a family model where the family essentially is the bedrock of support, as it has been historically in all terms related to sociology. But when we started our conversation around this new entity, and when we started this conversation around what it should look like, and we started having focus groups, we had a significant number of focus group meetings. The word that triggered people most negatively was family. Persons felt that the idea of family did not appeal to them. Many felt that families had violated them, violated their trust, did not offer that level of support. And so there's an underbelly of Barbadians. And this, again, has nothing to do with politics, because these are people of various age ranges, various geographical dispersions, persons of various political persuasion. But they've all felt that, in many cases, the family was not the level of support that both Marx and consensus theory would tell you that family would be. And so we had to rethink what it is that we can do to offer better support. So when the director speaks of offering counseling and family dynamics, a lot of what was existing in households was that families were not getting along. You could look at the combined income of many persons in households who are experiencing poverty, and the combined income of that household is above the income that should make a person experience poverty. But what do you have in that household? You have one house, 3 televisions in every room, or in each room. You can't turn on somebody's TV. You have 4 fridges. You can't touch the person's fridge. So you had a lot of families who, for whatever reason, are going through these dynamics that are not healthy in relation to being able to escape poverty, stay out of poverty, and to progress. And that is why a major component of the One Family is in relation to counseling, it is in relation to resolving those family conflicts, it is in relation to just having positive attitudes towards people. And then the other thing that we saw is that very small issues flare up and become very major issues. And so we had to deal with a lot of that. So they're very basic things. And this is, if this conversation is to be fruitful, we also have to understand that we really do have to get back to basics. And so there are a number of things that are preventing people from being able to escape poverty that would never find themselves being measured as part of the larger poverty conversation. But this ministry has engaged itself in those things.
Thank you, Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for an opportunity to enter into the estimates for the first time. First, let me commend the Minister and his team for the tremendous work that they are doing and have done. We always see and saw, certainly when we had the Hurricane Elsa, and tremendous work that the ministry did in housing people in a short space of time was excellent. And I believe they still have a few people that they're still taking care of. And then also when we have fires and dealing with fires as well, and emergency housing, again, tremendous work that the ministry does with their rapid response. Just a few months ago, I had to respond to a house fire, incidentally not even in my constituency, but a neighboring constituency. And they were able to assist, especially DPS, who happened to be at a location, who got the housing for the people at the same location that he was at. So I was very grateful, because when you're faced with somebody looking in your face with no place to sleep that night, all of their possessions destroyed, it's a very emotional and harrowing thing. And all of us in this chamber may have felt it at one point in time. And with that, I wanted to ask the Minister the first question, and it has to do with Sterling. When I was Minister of Housing, the facility at Sterling that housed, I believe, the adolescents at the time, closed for want of needing repairs. And it's a large site, about 7 acres, I believe. And I'm asking, in these estimates or anywhere, what plans do you have for the facility at Sterling? If you could share those plans with us.
Thank you, Honourable Member. No, Sterling is a site that has very special meaning to me. When I was manager of administration at the Child Care Board, Sterling was actually one of the bigger children's homes. And I'd always felt that Sterling had enough lands to be able to do a number of things. We could have done some agriculture there at Sterling. We could have built a training center at Sterling. Regrettably, Sterling fell into ruin and has pretty much not been used. There were 3 cottages that were built by, originally, wasn't it originally? Optimist built them originally, 3 cottages, and donated to the Child Care Board when Minister Lashley was the minister at the time. And those properties also needed constant repair, and then housing was able, thankfully, to repair those cottages for the ministry. But I've always felt that we should be able to do more at Sterling. And Sterling was then returned to the ministry from the Child Care Board, returned to the ministry proper. So the ministry proper has responsibility for Sterling. When we determined that part of the government's response to the aging population was that we would need to build residences to allow us to accommodate the aging population, who in many cases need residents. And we also looked at daycare. But when we considered that we needed to build out a facility, and the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Finance had made available to us in last year's estimates $7 million to the National Assistance Board to be able to do so for the first time, then we felt Sterling would be a natural place to do it. I have a love for the building, I must confess. And we then determined that we would build in the initial instance about 30 residences, single and duplex cottages. Very nicely done. We have drawings very nicely done to accommodate the elderly persons. and that we would want to have a model where we work with BARP and we work with Seroptimus to be able to run those residences. Seroptimus currently has a facility that they run, so they have that level of expertise. And I don't think anybody in Barbados questions BARP's legitimacy anymore. And BARP has done a fantastic job and has been a great partner for the ministry. So between the three of us, we were looking at what could we build out at Sterling. And so we've done some drawings in the first instance to begin that transformation. This is going to be the first time that you will see housing at that level designed specifically for the elderly. With supporting facilities. So we're going to have infrastructure for dementia. On the one hand, we're going to have parks designed specifically to cater to persons who are in need of that level of support. The other thing is, because as you said, it's about 7 acres. And even with our drawings, we still had room for a lot of other things to be done. And we are anticipating, before the end of these estimates, hopefully, but surely in the near future, to have the resources to build residences for persons with disabilities too. One of the things that I think is a real tragedy in Barbados, and it is almost painful, if not shameful, that has gone unnoticed for so long, is that adults with disabilities, especially severe disabilities, have nowhere to go. When a person has a disability, as a child, they can stay with the child care board. But when you're 18 years old, you're not really supposed to be at the child care board, but there's no facility for them. And at the child care board now, you would find persons who are in their 30s, some older adults, in a facility that's designed for children. I do not have to tell you how uncomfortable it would make any right-thinking person to have a facility designed for children, loaded with children and adults in that same space, even if the person has a disability. So we're going to build out some residences for persons with disabilities at Sterling to begin to fill that specific hole. And then lastly, we're also thinking that a daycare center for children would also be appropriate there as well. We have the space. And what that does is that allows us to have a system of intergenerational exchange previously unheard of, but that all of the literature tells us is where we should be going. So you have an older facility and a child facility, and the older people get to work with the children, and children learn about the elderly. And then you have a facility for persons with disabilities as well. And so children get to see persons with disabilities, and then they learn a sense of empathy. And currently there is no daycare facility in St. Philip. So it fills that void. And it allows us then to offer a more holistic social package. And we want to do it, as I said, with BARP and with Seroptimus, because in so doing, the estimates will show, I genuinely believe again that there is a legitimacy that the NGO sector will always have, that the government will never have, no matter how good a government you are. And to work with the persons who've proven themselves in that space, and Seroptimus and BARP have done so. So that is the plans currently as they stand for Sterling.
Mr. Chairman, I beg that you do not report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
The question is that I do not report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 2:45 p.m.
The question that this honourable chairman be suspended until 2:45 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chairman stands suspended until 2:45 p.m.